Hey, gang, welcome back to Placebo Effect Podcast. I am super thrilled for my next guest. My next guest is my dear friend, Geoff Barker, who heads up the Hope is Alive branch here in the DFW Metro. Hey, Geoff, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Ruben, good to see you, mate. We finally made it.
I know. And I definitely want to give you quite a bit of leeway to talk about Hope is Alive, because that's really how we met, right? I have a heart for those who kind of hit bottom with coping or struggling with addiction in its forms, either with drug or alcohol. I myself have a story to share in that regard, but this isn't about that. I think this is in part about that as our common thread to how we met, and I'll let you talk about Hope is Alive because I think it's a very important foundation. But I really am also interested with your story because you actually spent most of your life as a non-believer, just like me, and that was another kind of common bond that we shared. So tell us a little bit about your story, Geoff. You actually come from a little bit of a fame from down under. So talk to me, Goose.
Yeah, I had my 15 minutes back in the day. So I guess the story sort of begins in England. I'm actually English, not Australian, and I went into the military, became a British commando, and after that, getting my Green Beret, I sort of thought, well, I want to go and explore and do the whole fame and fortune thing, see what happens. And so I moved over to Australia. And I started Australia's first personal training company. It was kind of a novelty back then, and that sort of got me into this sort of limelight because there were stories written about it, and we used to train all the celebrities when they came into town, which was kind of novel. All those oldies out there, that people like New Kids on the Block and Dire Straits and those kind of guys, and that sort of got me into this circle of people that made me realize, wow, this fame thing is kind of good. This fills a few holes, a few voids in my psyche, in my life. And at the time, I was a hardcore atheist. When I say hardcore, I hated Christians so much that I actually studied Hebrew to be able to destroy them in arguments. And because I have a curious mind, I also read all of the religious texts of the time. So the Bible, the Tao Te Ching, the Quran, the Apocrypha Gospels, the Gnostic texts, all of that stuff. And I sort of read out of a curiosity, or a morbid curiosity, to try and teach myself how dumb humans can be to believe in this thing called faith or spirituality or any of the woo-woo stuff that I absolutely abhorred. And I was a big science buffin, so I used to subscribe to all the science magazines, and that sort of was my god at the time, was science and money and success, and I threw myself into that 100%. And from being at the right place,
let me ask you something though, because it's one thing to be a non-believer, but it sounds like you almost had an axe to grind with believers. So maybe share us a little bit with what was kind of getting your grind about
my
that.
goat.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was brought up in a split home. So my mother was very Christian, very spiritual lady, and my father was very atheist, and his entire family was atheist. And of course, the boy who doesn't get enough daddy attention gravitates towards his father even more. So I thought, emulating him, and he was the smarter one by a long shot of the two, and so I just assumed he knew what he was talking about. But when my mum did drag me to church, which was quite often as a little kid, it drove me crazy. I hated it. I saw hypocrisy. I saw these weak people who seemed to have nothing to offer. There was no glamour. It was all like, tambourines and choruses, and I hated it. And then I started to see how society was affected by religion. And in my eyes at the time, society was very negatively affected. So I saw moral hypocrisy. I saw people being outcast and downtrodden because of Christian doctrines. I saw the moral police coming around, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I was very liberal and liberated. I was all about freedom. You should be able to do what you like. Do what thou wilt, as Aleister Crowley says. And that appealed to me much more than, we'll follow this rule because some guy on a pulpit tells you to. So I had a disdain for being told what to do, especially by people who I saw as weak and deluded. And that's where a lot of it came from.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. And I would imagine all the book studying had you kind of do a little bit of a gut check, because I myself am familiar with this tactic. I know when I had a similar hexagram, being like you, atheist to Christian, I felt like if I could just study enough of the Bible, I'd already be sharper than that 80-20 rule, right? And how could I twist scripture and weaponize it almost and say, well, do you know about this, you about that? What do you think about this or that? So I'm sure you were probably in that axe to grind mode, having quite a bit of fun in that area. So
Yeah, well, I loved it. I'd go to, because we used to go to a lot of functions, and I'd go to parties, and inevitably I'd find the Christian in the room, and I'd spend the whole evening destroying them. And that was a great pleasure. I look back with disgust at my behavior, but back then it was the highlight of my evening. It made all of the events we had to go to much less boring, and I felt like I was doing society a service by unraveling the delusions of these people, so as that we could have a society where we could live freely and do whatever you want. And that was my thing. I did it, I thought, for a good reason at the time, but in retrospect, obviously it wasn't.
right. Yeah, the dunking on Christian activity seems to be pretty popular with a lot of atheists that in this way want to go troll the Christians, so to speak, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And Australia is a very atheist. So I moved to Australia. Australia was a very atheist country, and it was very easy to look down your nose at Christians because everybody did generally. And I just thought that was the way to do it. So what happened was that whilst I was running this personal training company, I got a message from my agent, because I used to do commercials and various other things. And she said, well, there's this show coming to town. It's an American show. It's called American Gladiators, and they're doing an Australian version of it. And so I went and tried out. 10,000 people around the country, all the top athletes, the military, everybody tried out. And they picked 7 guys and 7 girls, and I became one of the Australian Gladiators. And because I was an ex-commando and I had it tattooed on my shoulder, they decided to call me Commando, funnily enough. And so that was the start of a whole new chapter of my life. And from that, it sort of grew. Obviously, it became the massive, huge 1980s hit show for years. And through that, I started going to red carpet events. You start getting in with the in crowd. And right at that time, Australia had become big in the movie industry. We'd set up this massive movie studio called Fox Studios, and all of the big movies were coming to Australia to be made. So we had Mission Impossible and Moulin Rouge and Matrix and Troy, and a lot of these big blockbusters were made in Australia. And so I started to, again, get involved in that side of things. And it wasn't long after that the celebrity and the whole fame thing, I was really enjoying it. I mean, anybody who tells you being famous is not a good thing to be, well, no, it's fantastic for a while. And I'd met my wife at that time whilst I was doing Gladiators, and I thought that there was a potential to start up a different type of model agency. And so we started up what we called initially a body model agency, and it turned out to ended up being the biggest model agency in Australia. And that meant we had firsthand contact with all of the movie studios. And so my life sort of started climbing up the ladder, and we started to go to all these massive industry parties, Vogue this and Marie Claire that, and Fashion Week, and all the men's magazines, and Sports Illustrated, and we were involved in all of these things, either providing talent, models, and actors for these things, or going to the openings and the closings and the big events, and it was very, very glamorous at the time. Lots of red carpets, 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And it was all great to start with, until you start to realize that, well, if you're going to be doing this 4 or 5, 6 days a week, it's late. You're going to be up late. So you start thinking, well, it's all the booze is free, so I can drink a lot of vodka, and that's fun. And then it's like, well, all the cocaine is free. And so you start, getting involved in all of the dark side of that. And it seemed cool at the time. And, it didn't affect me that much in the beginning, because I would use it well, we used to see going out as networking, and it was part of building our company. So we would have to go out to these events, and because I was usually hungover from the night before, I would take a pick me up to keep me going for the next night. And that was all well and good until it started to become a little bit more tragic. And then all of a sudden I was drinking far too much, and I was having to take far too many drugs to get myself back to normal again. And all of the glamour started to wear off. I mean, the celebrity lifestyle is like anything else. You know, when you start something that's fun and exciting, it's fun and exciting. And then after a while, it just becomes normal and boring. And to cope and compensate for that, I would take even more drugs and even more alcohol. And I started to get really in a not good place. Now, my wife was smart. So we did this for about 10 years. And we went overseas, and we went to Iraq for the troops and did shows for the troops. And we did, you know, we wrote 3 best-selling books, and we had TV shows. And my wife had a syndicated radio show of her own. And so we were doing all the things that were supposed to bring you happiness. And, you know, signing autographs, red carpets, everything's free. But I wasn't happy. I was getting less and less happy the more and more I got. Now, stupid me, you know, I'm not the smartest tool in the shed. I thought, well, maybe just go harder. So I did. I ramped it up again and started taking more of everything and starting doing more of everything. And I was still under this belief that freedom came from doing whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted. And if I could just set myself up into a situation where I could do that, I would be happy. You know, all of the sex, all of the drugs, all of the highs, all of the money I could possibly have. Eventually I was going to find happiness. But I started to notice that I was not just not finding happiness, but I was becoming less and less fulfilled. And it got to the point where I noticed that a lot of the people who were richer and more famous weren't any happier. And I'm like, why am I climbing this ladder so hard and not getting the results that I want? And so the logic kicks in at some point in time, even through the clouded haze in your brain. And one day I was at home, and I was just thumbing through my books, my bookshelf, and I just picked a random book out, flicked to a random page, and the first thing I read was Ecclesiastes, the book in the Bible, which is apparently Solomon talking about all of his wealth and all of the things he's done, and how successful, and how many concubines, and how many buildings he's built, and how many slaves he's got, and how much cattle he's got. And he basically had about 1 million times more than I could have ever dreamt. And then the bit that really cut me was he expressed basically depression. He was like, I've got all this, I've done all that, and it's just nothing but the wind. It's meaningless. Right. And I was like, wow, this guy understands me. Yeah. And it was the first time anything in the Bible had struck home.
It's so good.
So
it's so good.
Yeah. And so
vanity, it's all vanity.
It's all vanity. Yeah. I'm like, wow. So that's when I started to realize maybe my logic wasn't sound, and the idea of more is better, obviously, clearly, historically, isn't true. So that evening I had just been watching.
I love the little snippet. I'm going to paraphrase. Being alive as a dog is better than being a dead lion, right? And in the sense of like, you could be regal and royal and have all the stuff, but we're all just dust in the wind at the end of it all, right? So what did you really accomplish?
Exactly. And so that evening I was watching a documentary on the Persian armies and how they used to sail their boats up to the shore, and they get all of the soldiers out up to the enemy's shore. We get all the soldiers out, and then they just burn the boats. And being an ex-soldier, I'm like, wow, man, that would make you move forward. That would make you fight. And I thought, that's what I need. I need to burn my boats. How do I do that? And the first thing that came to my mind was, I'm going to give everything I own away. I'm going to start again, ground zero. I'm going to give it all away to the poor and start with nothing. and see what happens. See if this universe thing is true. So at that time, Oprah was big, and Oprah would have the top 10 spiritual books. And I'd read all of these books, and they'd always be talking about, well, the universe provides, the universe this. And I was like, all right, I'll call the universe's bluff. Let's see if this stuff is real, because sitting at home on my couch reading a book about it isn't living it. I've got to find out whether this is true or not, because the alternative is, I said to my wife, I'm going to either jump off a cliff or I'm going to jump off a cliff metaphorically. So she said, obviously, do it metaphorically. So I said to her, all right, darling, we're going to give everything away to the poor. We're going to put a YouTube clip up, which we did. And we got 12 million hits, 64,000 emails from people in need saying, oh, I need your jewelry, oh, I need your car, oh, I need your motorbike, oh, I need your designer clothes. And so over a period of a month, we gave everything we owned, the whole lot, away. We gave our businesses, because I had 3 businesses at the time. We gave the businesses to the staff, and we were left with a little white painter's van. So I don't want you to think it was some kind of a RV. This is like a painter's van with a mattress, a queen size mattress in the back, and nothing but a suitcase. So there was no facilities in it. There was no nothing. It was just a mattress and a suitcase. And that's how we started out. And
so you were still a non-believer at this point?
Oh,
you made this big move?
Hardcore.
And so okay. So then my question is, you were motivated by the fact that you'd had what people say you'd arrived. You're a great looking guy. Obviously, you were commando, you super fit. You guys were a dream couple down there. You had built this amazing business, of all the fame, all the fortune, life in the fast lane, as we would like to call it here in America, and seeing you were not fulfilled. And so this would inspire you to say, well, let me just get rid of everything.
Okay, so I had twin sons born to my first wife, and they were getting to the age where they were starting to ask questions. And it really, really hit home that I didn't have answers. And I thought to myself, well, the one thing I'm pretty sure of is that the only thing I know about being alive is that if I give birth to if I have a child, I should at least be able to set it on a straight path. And I didn't know what that straight path was. Now, the path I thought was straight was not. And so it was almost out of desperation for my sons that I was prepared to do anything, as well as my own mental health. Like I was going downhill really fast, and it was getting grungy. I'd find myself in some drug dealer's flat, snorting anything white off a table. And it was just getting ugly and old. And I thought there has to be a change. And the only way to do it is to blow up the world that I'm in, so as I can't go back to it. And so giving everything away wasn't just giving everything physical away. What we were doing is we were giving away our image. We were giving away the cool couple in town thing. We're giving away the parties and the red carpet stuff and the weekly appearances in newspapers, and we were giving away everything that we had built up over the last 10, 12 years. And that was what I thought. If I could blow up everything that wasn't making me happy, perhaps I would have room for that which would make me happy. And that's how we set out.
I'm Bessie.
I'm Geoff.
I'm Bluebell, and this is our story.
I'm alone with you. Crazy times, wild parties.
You're under a microscope. Everyone expects you to be fabulous, and everyone expects you to be grateful for how cool your life is, which is, I think, one of the reasons why so many celebrities go off the deep end.
Let the bass kick. Celebrity couple literally leaving it all behind.
Being in the spotlight.
Announced they were giving away everything they owned.
Hi, I'm Bessie.
And I'm Geoff.
And welcome to our life change experiment.
Yes, and the big giveaway. Basically, we're giving away everything we own.
Furniture, clothing, shoes,
Computers,
laptops,
knives and forks and plates and
everything but the kitchen sink.
which we would have given you if we could have got it out of the
You and the family in that little white van.
Yeah, so that's the addition, is that we had a 6-month-old baby. So my wife had just given birth to my little daughter, And I mean, you might say, well, why on earth would she do this? But she sort of was of the opinion, first of all, she was like, no, we're not doing that. And then she went and had a walk around the Botanic Gardens, because we used to live near the Botanic Gardens overlooking the harbor. And she took the little one for a walk, and she realized, well, this little one's going to grow up in one of two worlds, either the world that that is destroying us, or a world that we don't yet know, that perhaps it would be worth going to find out. So she sort of realized that it was probably a good idea, an adventure at worst, and that she would be up for it. So God bless her. She said yes. And so we set out, and we set out with a few rules. It was really winging it. And I don't even know where any of these rules came from, other than looking back, it must have been the Holy Spirit. But my initial rules were, we would travel completely randomly. So it would be like, just go wherever thou wilt. But we had to say yes to everything. So if somebody asked us to do something, we'd say yes. If somebody told us that there was a cult, we'll go and we'll join that for a little while. And so we started traveling around the country, and I'd be like filling up with gas at a service station and talking to the people next to me, and they'd say, oh, what are you guys doing? And I'd say, oh, well, we're off looking for the meaning of life. And they'd say, well, there's a guy living in the hills in a cave. Well, why don't you go and ask him? So we'd go and hang out and find out what they were up to, what he believed. And he'd say, oh, well, the Hare Krishnas are in the next state. So we go and live with the Hare Krishnas. And then, oh, well, the Buddhists are over there. So we go and live with the Buddhists. And so we did this all around the country, living with these different tribes and religions. And we ended up living with the Muslims and the Hindus and the witches and the pagans and the nudists. And I mean, we just lived with all sorts of wild and wonderful people. And one of my rules was, when we lived with them, we had to take on their beliefs. So it wasn't about going in and crossing my arms and going, oh, show me if this is real. It was like, no, for the time we are here, we're going to buy into this 100%. So we would do the chanting and the rituals and the meditations and whatever it was that they did, we would do it too. And I figured, if I threw myself off the cliff and into this world of spirituality, which I didn't believe in, if something was there, I would feel it, I would experience it, and I would know it was true or not. And so that was the other thing that I decided. I had to be, and this is a key thing, nobody could tell me what to believe. No one could stand on the pulpit and give me some way to live my life. No book could tell me. I had to be transformed. It was no good just becoming a Buddhist or becoming a Hindu. Whatever I chose had to change me inside, so as I didn't have this void in my soul, so I didn't feel this depression, so I didn't feel completely lost as I had felt. And if it didn't change me, I wasn't going to buy into it. And so that's how we set out. And we started off in Australia, because that's where we were. And after Australia, one other thing was that we weren't working. And when I say we weren't working, we actually worked a lot, but we would not work for money. That was our rule. We must not work for money. We must work for free. And so I would be driving along, and I'd see a broken fence and knock on the door, and the old lady would come out, and I'd say, the universe has brought me that you've got a broken fence, and I'm going to fix it for free. I don't want anything. I don't want barter. I don't want anything. And so I would. We'd do things for free all around the country. Some people would be like, oh, there was an old couple who hadn't had a holiday in a long time. So they owned a ranch. So we went and looked after their ranch and picked up cow manure all day. And again, all for free. And there's someone else had their business had broken, and because of our business skills, I put together a website for them and built all their business systems out again. And so we went around doing all of these different things, scrubbing toilets, cleaning houses, helping old ladies. And the rule was that we would always do it for zero money. Now, as it happens, a lot of people would be kind, and they'd maybe give us a pie or a bottle of wine or a piece of cheese, but we wouldn't do it for that reason. And it was really quite cathartic because our old life, you have to remember, was all about money. How much money are we making? How many hours do I have to work for it? How much profile is it going to give me? And so it was a complete opposite of that. This was like, don't care about the profile, don't care about the money. All I want to do is put a smile on this person's face and solve a problem. And it was one of the things that started to click in my brain. I was like, wow, this is quite cathartic. This is actually, I feel this changing me a little bit. And so, what happened after that was a series of miracles. I can only call them miracles, look, in retrospect. And we started getting opportunities to travel around other countries. For instance, a New Age guru contacted us out of the blue and said, hey, I've got this New Age retreat happening in Africa. I'll fly you guys over if you come and be part of the retreat, and I can use your name for promotion. And so we went over to Africa. We ended up spending almost a year in Africa, digging latrines, living in mud huts, helping the locals, starting small businesses for them, and traveling around doing exactly the same thing, interviewing witch doctors and fascinating characters. And so we ended up over six and a half years going to 33 countries. And I've meditated on the top of Mayan temples, and we've been through Africa, through Asia, through Europe, and lots of little individual countries as well. And collecting data. I mean, my idea was to interview the most amazing, most crazy, most interesting, most enlightened people I could possibly find on the planet, including meeting Richard Dawkins, which was interesting. So that was our journey for 7 years, and or 6.5 years. And it was about that time when I started to take some stock of what we were doing, and I started to realize that we really had lived with every religion I could think of, every tribe, every kindred nation, as they say, and I hadn't transformed. I had moments of ecstasy and moments of joy and moments of meditational bliss. Yeah, sure. But I still had that hole. I still had that void. And it started to really bother me, because it's not like I hadn't tried. It's not like I just sat at home reading the top 10 bestseller self-help books. I'd been out there, and I was kind of disappointed, and my depression started kicking back in again. And I realized I hadn't given up enough. That's what hit me. Geoff, you haven't given up enough. And all I could see in my mind's eye was these people called renunciates. I don't know if you know what a renunciate is. It's the people who live in caves. You've seen them in India. They live in a cave on a little thin mat, and they renounce, they give away comforts, heat, cold, whatever the weather temperature is, friendship, speaking, relationships, all of these things. They give away all of the things that we ordinarily would use to give us pleasure. They give it up, and they just sit with their raw, bare self. And I thought, if I can just get to my core, my essence, I'll be able to find out who I am, and then I can build on that. So that was my plan: become a renunciate. So I said to my wife, listen, I want to do this thing. I want to become a renunciate and live in a cave. And she's like, sweetheart, I've given everything away. I have one suitcase. You can't expect me and our baby to follow you. And I said, no, I guess that's true. So why don't you go and live with a friend, and I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to strip back to the very, very core. And my wife was really upset. She's like, we've given everything away. I'm really worried for your mental health. What happens if you end up, destroying yourself? And so that night she went to bed quite upset, and we parked out in this car park in a complete random place, and we went to sleep. Now, the next morning, I wake up and I go for a walk around my van, security check, and there's a guy running by, and he stops. And he's a thin, wiry guy with a white hoodie, and he's got a blonde mustache. He looks like an old surfer, hippie surfer. And he says, hey, dude, what are you guys doing here? And I was like, oh, well, we're sort of out trying to find the meaning of life. And he said, oh, I did that. I said, really? What did you do? He turned to me and goes, I was a renunciate for 5 years. I lived in a cave. I gave up warmth and heat and food and blah, blah. And I'm like, what? I mean, I got to say, up to before that day and up till this day, I have never in my life met a renunciate. And on the very, very day that I decided I wanted to be one walks by my van to discuss it with me. I mean, if there isn't
counter, Geoff, that was
exactly
not a counter, Geoff.
Exactly. So then I said to him, well, what happened? And he said, oh, I was really good at giving things up. And then one day I realized the only thing I couldn't give up was how proud I was at giving everything up. And I was like, what? Wow. He said, yeah, I got out of the cave. I went and borrowed some money. I bought a packet of cigarettes, a tub of ice cream, and a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I never went back again. And I'm like, wow, mind blown. I could not believe it. The very thing I was about to throw my whole life into, he was showing me that it was a dead end. And it felt like the universe was putting a full stop on that rabbit hole. And of course, my wife was like, there is a God. And so, you know, that was a really red letter moment in our lives. And it made me think, man, something is guiding us here. And I don't know what it is, but I do believe we're probably doing the right thing. And I just need to keep pushing on.
Hey, that's beautiful. He stopped you from going into a cave and deucing out to your wife, man. So
yeah,
that was very powerful.
Yeah. So we then carried on traveling and doing all the things we'd done before. And it took another year before the depression started to kick in again, because one more year after that revelation with the renunciate, I thought, this is it. You know, I'm nearly there. I must be at the finish line. No. Went on another year of emptiness and
well, let me ask you a question about that, though, because when you were talking about the renunciate encounter story, one thing that really spoke to me, Geoff, was that he almost called you out, that as if you were still chasing something that was very ego motivated, right? And you said you were pretty much like in love with the fact that you parted things, almost as like a pat on your back kind of thing. So I kind of conflated all of that into, well, some of your charitable work, you know, giving back out, because on paper it talk about, wow, how can you be even more selfless in what you were doing? But it sounded like there was some sort of selfish interest still taking place within you. So did you find that way of living alter at all for you after that kind of self-check, if I'm making sense?
Yeah, no, to be honest, the doing things for free was not what I wanted to do. It wasn't an ego thing at all. In fact, it was the opposite. It was me trying to bash my ego on the head. And I hated every time we said yes to something. I can even feel it in my gut now. It's like, I go, yeah, okay, we'll do that. We'll clean up all the dog poo in your backyard. Yeah, I can't wait. So we really were doing it for what I thought was benevolent and experimental purposes. I thought, this is an experiment, and there's no point just, you know, waltzing around having a good time, you know, with all these spiritual people. I've got to give a pound of flesh. And so this was my way of giving a pound of flesh. So when the renunciate told me, so you understand it was him that went away and got the cigarettes and the ice cream and all of that sort of stuff. So what he showed me was that was just a rabbit hole that I didn't need to go down. And so we carried on doing exactly what we were doing. As I said, I was a little bit hopeful that I was getting close to the answers. And, you know, a year down the track, I wasn't. And, you know, I'd had a bunch more experiences, and they were still empty, and they were still not fulfilling. And so I realized my daughter now was almost 7 years old. She'd been sleeping on the back seat of a van for 7 years. And yeah, she'd had amazing experiences. She'd done homeschool in the Serengeti in Africa, and, you know, she'd been around. And, you know, one of the little miracles, we had all these little miracles happen that, you know, I didn't know there were miracles at the time. They just seemed like fortuitous moments. Like, for instance, when she was little and we had no money, she would walk into a playground, and then when she came out again, she'd have a $50 note in her hand. And things like that. One evening it was -21, everything in the van was frozen, including her bottle of milk. And I thought, this isn't particularly healthy for my family. And so I said to my wife, listen, with the little money we've got, let's see if we can find a hotel. And we couldn't. There was no hotels at the price that we wanted, which was significantly less than what they were asking. And we were just about to give up. And I said, just press refresh one more time. And she pressed refresh, and right there, boom, popped up. Cheapest hotel I've ever seen in my life. And we spent the evening running around the hotel with our underwear on in the heat, laughing at the snow outside. And so little miracles like this. And another one which was quite interesting was we were in the middle of nowhere again, and we were running out of fuel, and we hadn't eaten, and we had $30, and to get to the next civilization was going to cost that much in fuel. And so it was like, okay, do we fill up or do we eat? And we realized, well, the only thing we had to fill up, because we needed to get out of this place, because if we got stuck there, it was, life or death. And so my wife went into the gas station, and she said to the guy behind the counter, can you put $30 on number 7? And he looked at her and goes, what are you talking about? He goes, there's already $30 on it. And so it was little miracles like that. So she could then buy some sandwiches, and we had the gas. So we got the whole lot. And I'm like, wow, something's happening here. There's all these little things that allow us just to go to the next step, And so I really believe that we were on the right path. And so you can imagine that, a year down the track with still no defining purpose, no defining answers, I was getting quite depressed again, to the point where I was like, okay, my daughter's got to go to real school, and this is going nowhere. We've been doing it 7 years. We've had a wonderful time. We've met some amazing people, had some crazy experiences, but I'm not transformed. I don't think that there is a God. I don't think there is anything spiritual. I think everything's just been fluke. And I'm about ready to go back, raise the flag for the atheists, say, yes, atheists, you were right. And you spiritual people are idiots. And I know, because I've tested it. And then go back to my hedonistic lifestyle and blow my brains out with cocaine or whatever. So that was the headspace I was in. And I thought, well, I'll give it one more chance. This is it. This is the last Hail Mary. And I thought, what's the craziest thing I could do that might get the attention of the powers that be? And I came up with the idea, all right, I'm going to do a 40-day fast. And in that 40-day fast, I'm going to split my time between appealing to the New Age universe and appealing to the Christian God, which I hadn't given any time. And I realized we'd been doing this for 7 years. I'd done every other tribe and every other religion and every other cult you can imagine. And the thing I'd avoided like the plague was the Christian God. And so I thought, for the final thing, I really can't avoid it. I'm going to have to put it in. And so my plan was I would get up at 6 a.m. I would do an hour's New Age meditation, some guru meditation, transcendental meditation, one of the ones I'd learned along the way. And then I would do an hour prayer, Christian prayer, an hour meditation, hour prayer, hour meditation, hour prayer. And I would do this 7 or 8 hours a day, go to sleep, wake up, do it all again for 40 days. And I thought, if I don't get an answer from that, I'm done. I figured I'd given it the best shot, and
Why'd you pick 40?
I'd just go back. Sorry?
Why'd you pick 40?
40 days? Well, that's what Jesus did, right? So I figured
okay, well, I needed that there at least. I had to score one for the Christians because you didn't pick that number out of thin air. So
no,
if you're gonna pick something to emulate, talk about something to emulate, right? The 40 days in the wilderness. Okay.
Well, I figured that I would do what the big cheese did.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was fortunate that my wife had made friends with a Jewish Buddhist monk, and who had a daughter that was the same age as my daughter, and she'd just lost her husband, and so she asked if my wife could move in with her and keep her company, and she happened to have a room out the back that was this little room with a bathroom attached, and it had a little window that looked over a brick wall, like a prison cell. And I said, right, well, that's where I'm going to lock myself in. So I did. Lock myself in. No media, no computers, no music, no books, no paper, no pen, no nothing, just me. And all I would drink is water. And all I would do is meditate, pray, meditate, pray, meditate, pray, meditate, pray. And I thought, if this doesn't work, I'm out. So I started, and bear in mind, it had been 7 years since I had given up all drugs. One of the miracles that had happened when we gave everything away was almost straight away, as soon as we hit the road, my desire for anything like that completely disappeared. And including my desire to party, all of the old vices, they just disappeared. And so I say that because of what I'm going to explain next. So I'd had 7 years completely clean. I'm in this room, I'm doing the meditations, and day 1, painful. Day 2, painful. Day 3. Anybody who's fasted for any length of time knows that after a while the hunger kind of dies down, but the boredom was it was insanely boring doing this pray, meditate, pray, meditate. Day 7 comes along and I am furious. I'm just angry because I'm like, man, I have given it my all. This is ridiculous. And I'm kneeling on the bed and I'm screaming at the wall and I'm going, you universe, you God, you piece of crap, you effort. You say knock and you'll answer. I've been bashing the door down and you haven't answered. You FF. I was just screaming and yelling and cursing at God. And right in the middle of this, right in the middle of me cursing and just yelling, it was as if every cell in my body, from the top of my head to the tip of my toes, suddenly exploded with this sensation of love, this warmth, this like I was being held by these giant arms, this warmth and this love it just encompassed every single cell in my body. I've never felt anything like it. And it just brings me to tears even now. And if you've ever experienced Jesus, the love of Jesus, it's just like, there's no words. And it's one of the reasons I hadn't shared this testimony for so many years. It's like, how do you put this into words? And I started crying and I started sobbing so hard. It was as if my guts were going to come out of my mouth. And I just sobbed and sobbed. And as this love and these arms around me, as I'm experiencing all of this, it's like my brain was taken out of my head, washed, and switched around. And everything I believed, all of my very hedonistic belief systems, like, abortion is great and sex before marriage and, let's do as thou wilt, all of those things that I thought were solid, sound ways to live life suddenly seemed really stupid. And I all of a sudden had this absolute reverence and belief in entirely the opposite worldview. And I literally went through a checklist of all the things I believed, and I suddenly didn't believe them anymore. I'm like, whoa, that's transformation right there. And then I had this picture of the void. And when I say a void, I don't know if any of the listeners out there have felt this before, but I just felt like there was this crevasse of emptiness in my soul. And, I'd cover it up with things like meditation and food and, entertainment. But I knew it was always there. And I suddenly had a picture of this giant crevasse. And it was full of cracks and fissures. And I remember thinking, because I was really into self-help, and I remember thinking, man, I didn't even know half these cracks were in me. How can you possibly self-help yourself when you don't even know half of the issues you've got? That was the first thing that struck me. And then as I watched, it was as if all these cracks just suddenly started closing, and the whole crevasse started closing like this until it was completely didn't have a mark on it, like there was never ever a hole there. And I was like, have I just experienced a miracle? It was just completely shocking. And again, this overwhelming love and this overwhelming warmth and this overwhelming father feeling, because I never had a good relationship with my father. And it was as if I was being shown, no, I am your real father. The guy I put on earth with you, he's just there to look after you while you're on the earthly plane, but I am your father. And then the first sane thing that I thought after all of these experiences, and they lasted, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. And the first thing that came to my mind was, oh no, does this mean I'm a Christian now? And I was absolutely devastated. I'm like, oh, of all of the things I don't want to be, I'd rather go back into the military and face Al Qaeda than tell people I was a Christian.
Wow.
But what I heard as I'm thinking these thoughts is I felt this cosmic laugh, almost like this sense of humor, and I felt like I heard this voice saying, "I'm so much bigger than what you think that word means," and then it said, "Rest in me, just rest in me." And I realized I've been struggling all these years. Back in the fame day, I was struggling to be recognized, struggling to be somebody, struggling to fill this void, and then struggling to find the answers and struggle. And now, in this moment, this beautiful love was just saying, rest in me. And it just broke me. And I literally did. I just lay there and cried and just felt that love of Jesus. And as I moved through it, I decided, okay, I'm going to continue my 40-day fast, but now I know the answer. I was totally transformed in that moment. I was totally healed in that moment. And I decided I was going to stay and do the 40-day fast. I was going to make sure it wasn't a fluke, make sure it wasn't some kind of a delusion, bed it in, really begin to understand what I had experienced. And so I did, and I did the whole 40-day fast. But I asked my wife to bring in, I sent her a little note because we weren't allowed to talk. And I sent her a little note saying, can you bring in a Bible and a Tao Te Ching? So I was a big lover of the Chinese Tao Te Ching because to me it was just like absolute wisdom. And I always thought the Bible was a load of rubbish. So here I have these two books, one from the past and one from potentially the present, the future. And I start reading the Tao Te Ching, and it just suddenly feels like I'm reading the back of a packet of cereal. It felt meaningless. All these wise words just seemed empty. And I started reading the Bible, and it felt like it was 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 10-dimensional. I suddenly started to see the history and all of the lives intertwined, and it had meaning beyond anything I'd ever seen before. And so I threw away the Tao Te Ching, and from then on I was just totally immersed in the Bible for the remainder of the 40 days. And so when I come out, my wife's like, what's the answer? Do I get to wear orange? Do I get to be a Buddhist, or are we Hare Krishnas, or what? And I said, no, we're Christians. And she's like, oh, buddy, you're on your own. I'm not going to be a Christian. And so she went on her own little journey. One of the funniest things was that, so I'm quite good on computers, and someone had given her a worship tape. And so her and the Jewish Buddhist monk would do the washing up in the morning with this Christian worship tape on. And I said, why are you listening to the Christian worship tape? And she says, I don't know. It just makes me feel good. She said, but can you take all the references to Jesus out of it? No. Aside from the fact it would ruin the soundtrack, no. And so about 3 months later, she had her own moment coming to Jesus, where she was in a seminar. It was actually a Christian, Christian money, how to handle your money well. What's that guy's name?
No.
Dave Ramsey. Yeah, it was a Dave Ramsey seminar.
Oh, Dave Ramsey. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't like some amazing speaker talking about the Holy Spirit and a call to the altar call. It wasn't any of that. It was just about finances.
Yeah, he's the finance guy. I didn't know he was the Christian finance guy, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's his thing. He's a very hardcore Christian. He goes around speaking at all the churches.
That's right.
Anyway, so she was in the middle of this seminar, and somehow the Holy Spirit touched her, and she just broke. And she ran out and bawled her eyes out like I had done, and said, "That's it. I'm giving my heart to Jesus," and that was it. So, like all women, she takes the ball and runs, because the next thing I know, she's running the women's meetings. She's volunteering for everything. She's getting up at 5 a.m. and making hot dogs for the homeless people in our area. And I mean, she just ran with it. And so to this day, she's now in seminary doing a theology degree. And so that's sort of our story.
Okay, yeah. And well, I guess to just segue back a sec to after the 40 days in this revelation, and then your wife's needing to come on a journey, did you guys essentially also kind of unpack the whole living in the wilderness thing and start making your way back into civilization, or?
Yeah. So now we'd found the answers, and plus, I wanted my daughter to settle down, and we moved into a small apartment near where my sons lived, because I wanted to be around my sons. And we had nothing, as you can imagine. We got ourselves some I was going to say meaningless jobs. That's not the right word, is it? Anyway, some not very interesting jobs, just enough to pay the rent. And then we went around the back streets and picked up chairs and tables and basically furnished the whole house from stuff people had thrown out onto the street, which was kind of fun. And that's how we started getting back into the society, as you, if you will.
Gotcha. Wow, such a good story. So tell me then, how did you stumble into Hope is Alive?
So Hope is Alive. So after our journey, we sort of settled down, started working. I'm a bit of a crypto guy, so I decided I was going to get involved in doing a lot of crypto stuff, which meant I was in front of a computer the whole time. Really didn't get out very much. And I did this for about 10 years. And I started to sort of feel a bit dead inside. We were going to church. We were, full of the Holy Spirit. We had the most amazing friends. Our life had been transformed. But I really felt like I wasn't giving back to the Lord. And I'd done so much to destroy the kingdom over the years. And, I got to the point where whilst I wasn't, doing any partying as such, I was still drinking too much, because I was feeling, I guess it was guilty, maybe not guilty, perhaps more like my purpose wasn't being fulfilled. And so I prayed one day very sincerely, and I sort of said, God, give me something that uses my old skills, because it's not like I went to university or anything. Something that uses my own old skills, something that I will be able to give back to, something that's building the kingdom, and that will give me some sort of fulfillment, so I can get out from behind this computer and try and beat some of this alcohol issues. And about a few days later, I get a call from a mate of mine who said, "Hey, I'm on the board of directors of this place called Hope is Alive. It's a recovery and mentoring ministry. And they're desperate to open up Dallas, Fort Worth. And they've tried with a few other people, but because it's so large, they haven't been able to do it. Would you be willing to take the job?" And I'm thinking, well, first of all, I've never worked for corporate. I've never had a boss. I've never worked for a ministry. And I've been stuck behind a computer doing my own thing the whole time. And I wasn't entirely sure that I could do it. But God sort of said to me very strictly, he said, "Geoff, you can be in rehab or you can work at rehab." And I said, "Okay, I'll take the check." And so it was such a blessing, because as I started to get involved, I realized, man, this is amazing what we're doing here. This is what I call it. I call it the Navy SEALs of recovery, because we have an 85% success rate, which is unheard of anywhere else in America. And we put that down to being 100% Christ focused and having a program that is second to none. And so I was really able to throw myself into this, and watching. One of the things that's really, really amazing is, unlike a lot of recovery where the idea is to get them off drugs and to sort of like clean them up and then put them out back into society, we don't do that. We'll get them off the drugs, we'll clean them up, and then we work on bringing their families back into the picture. We work on reconciliation. We work on setting them up with jobs. We work on getting them bank accounts, bank balances, skill sets. And then what we've discovered is that our guys end up becoming disciples. They're so full of Jesus by the time they're done with all of this, because they realize it's Jesus that has been able to help them through these struggles. And they'll go out and they'll start Bible studies, they'll start youth groups, they'll start churches. We've had people so it's not about turning drug addicts into functioning members of society. For us, it's about turning drug addicts into leaders and disciples in their community. So every one of them goes out and they affect 10, 100, 1,000 people. And I kind of liken it to the story in the Bible where Jesus heals the demoniac. So, that guy's crazy and no one can come near him, and he lives in the hills, and Jesus comes up and he heals him. And then the guy walks down into town and everyone's like, "Dude, what happened to you?" And he's just like, "Jesus." And so we're like, literally, Jesus is healing these people in our homes and in our recovery program, and they're going back into their communities and they're friends and the members of the community are saying like, dude, what happened to you? And they're like, Jesus. And so it's amazing testimony. And I'm getting to see all these lives transformed. And I say to people now, if you look at the Bible and you're like, oh, well, where are all the modern miracles? I see all these miracles in the Bible, but I don't see them in modern society. Come and hang out at our houses for a little bit. You will see miracles happening every week, every month, as these people's lives are transformed and their families are brought back together again. And it's just amazing to be part of that. And so that's what Hope is Alive is. We also work a lot with the families. And so it's not just about leaving the families out. We have programs for which help the families understand what addiction is. We give them tools. We teach them about codependence. And we give them a support group, which is run by people who have had family members in addiction. So we cover the whole gamut there. We're also working in schools. And yeah, it's a massively powerful program. And we're rolling out in Dallas-Fort Worth at the moment. We're hoping to launch a woman's house home in the next year. And yeah, God is really good, because all of the old skill sets that I had from back in the day, the networking, the talking to people of all different types, from the highest of society to the lowest of society, of course, my military training, all of that has just been able to be, God's been able to reuse mightily in what I'm doing here with Hope is Alive.
Yeah, so amazing, such a powerful ministry, and it really is transforming lives. I absolutely love the newsletter that you put out to folks who are sponsoring of just the changed lives. And like you said, seeing these men turn into leaders is super powerful. There's just no other way to describe it other than these people are walking miracles.
Amen to that. As am I.
Amen. So Geoff, for those that want to be interested in looking into the Hope is Alive ministry and maybe even becoming a sponsor like myself, what would you recommend?
So you can check out what Hope is Alive is about by going to hopeisalive.net. That's their website. And then if you would like to know more and speak to me personally, perhaps, I'm really happy to discuss any of, I work with people all the time. If you've got some questions about Jesus or about our adventure or about Hope is Alive, you can get me on Geoff.Barker. Geoff is spelled Geoff. Barker, Barker, at hopeisalive.net.
Yep, and I've got that there on the screen for folks, and also have it in the description below. Wow, Geoff, my friend, my brother in Christ, what a great story, and you're doing such an amazing thing, helping build the Hope is Alive ministry here in the DFW Metro. So just super grateful for you, super blessed to call you friend, and thank you so much for coming on the day and telling your story. Really appreciate it.
Mate, thank you for all your support. Thank you for your kindness and for being a little light yourself. I appreciate your inspiration, mate.
Thank you. God bless you guys.